She had less than 10 minutes to decide who lived and who died. The radio crackled once, then again, 3 words that froze the blood in her veins. "We're getting overrun." Through the humid veil of the jungle, Leia Cole could see it happening. Tiny flashes of orange light, 12, maybe more, burst like fireflies across the dark green canopy. Each flash was a muzzle. Each one, death searching for a target. 300 meters away, an entire SEAL team was trapped. Outnumbered, pinned down, surrounded by gunfire that seemed to come from the trees themselves. The radio traffic was calm, clipped, professional, men doing their jobs while the odds erased their chances. Alpha team taking heavy contact. Multiple casualties. Requesting air support over. Leia's eyes didn't leave the scope. Her rifle was still, breathing steady, crosshairs tracing the chaos she couldn't stop. Not yet. She'd been told to observe only. Standard procedure. Wait for air support. Stay invisible. But the truth was simple, brutal, and undeniable. Air support was 30 minutes out. Her teammates had maybe 10. The math didn't lie. The book said maintain observation. The book said don't engage alone. But the book wasn't bleeding in a jungle valley. Leia was one sniper with one rifle, but sometimes that was all the world had left. She pressed her face closer to the scope. The humidity made her skin slick. Her heartbeat thudded against the rifle stock. Below her, the team was trying to maneuver, returning fire, calling targets, shifting positions that didn't exist. There was no cover. The jungle swallowed everything. 50 enemy fighters, maybe more. Machine guns on the ridges, marksmen in the trees. It wasn't a firefight. It was an execution in progress. She adjusted her scope, corrected for humidity and wind. Her voice stayed calm as she keyed her radio. "Ground Team Alpha, keep your heads down. I'm going to work." For a heartbeat, silence. Then the team leader's voice came through, steady but laced with disbelief. "Overwatch, negative. Maintain observation. You can't engage that many targets solo." Leia exhaled slowly. "Watch me." She switched to receive only. No more orders, no more hesitation. The Barrett M82A1 lay across her pack, massive, heavy, built to punch through walls and engine blocks. Most used it for material targets. She used it because in a jungle this dense, precision was a myth. What mattered was power and margin for error. She chambered a .50 caliber round. The bolt locked with a heavy, satisfying click. Her finger rested on the trigger. Her mind went silent. Target 1. Range 347 meters. Machine gun left flank. Through the scope she saw him. The gunner, methodical, calm, working the weapon like he'd done it 100 times. Every burst chewed another line through the foliage toward the SEALs. The belt-fed thunder of his weapon was the loudest sound in the world. She found the rhythm of his bursts, waited, breath held. The world narrowed to a heartbeat. Then she squeezed. The Barrett's recoil slammed into her shoulder. Through the glass, she saw the gunner vanish in a mist of red. His partners froze, scanning, panicking. Leia didn't stay to watch. She rolled 3 meters right, sliding behind a mound of roots and moss. Return fire tore through her previous position seconds later. Discipline, accuracy, too late. 38 seconds, one position down. She didn't think, she calculated, she moved. The clock was ticking. Target 2. Range 298 meters. Machine gun blocking the retreat route. That position was key, the cork in the bottle. If the SEALs couldn't fall back, they were already dead. She centered her scope, made the adjustment, fired. The round hit low, tearing through the gunner's abdomen. He folded instantly. The 2 beside him ducked, shouting. Leia was already gone. Her movements were smooth, methodical, practiced. Fire, relocate, fire again. Never twice from the same place. Never let the jungle remember where you were. 1 minute 19 seconds. 2 positions down. She barely registered the ache in her shoulder or the sweat stinging her eyes. Every shot was a choice, every second another life slipping toward zero. Target 3. Range 412 meters. High ground leadership element. 2 men with radios, coordinating enemy fire. Kill the brain, and the body forgets how to fight. She steadied the rifle, exhaled, squeezed. The first dropped instantly. Second reached for the radio. Leia fired again. The man's body slumped over the device, silencing his voice forever. Time 2 minutes 15 seconds. 4 confirmed kills. The jungle's rhythm shifted. The constant, synchronized rattle of gunfire began to stutter. Coordination broke. Some fired blindly, others paused to listen. Chaos was creeping in. The SEAL team leader's voice came back, a note of hope cutting through the static. Overwatch, whatever you're doing, keep doing it. Enemy fire's thinning. Leia didn't respond. Talking was a luxury. Her focus tunneled again. Her heartbeat slowed. The forest wasn't chaos anymore. It was data, patterns, wind angles, trajectories. Her world reduced to motion and math. Target 4. Range 356 meters. Gun behind a fallen log, excellent cover. She waited. The gunner rose, fired short bursts, dropped again. She counted seconds. 1, 2, 3, then the muzzle appeared again. Her finger found the trigger. The barrel cracked. The man flew backward, body limp, armor shredded. Time 2 minutes 58 seconds. She was halfway through her plan. But the enemy was learning. A ripple of movement caught her eye, fighters spreading, scanning the tree line. They knew a sniper was out there. They just didn't know where. Not yet. She could feel it in the air, the shift. Fear was turning their aggression into paranoia. The jungle, once their weapon, now betrayed them with every rustle. Target 5. Range 289 meters. Flanking maneuver on the SEAL's left side. 5 fighters moving low. She tracked the lead man through her scope. Partial concealment, moving target. She led the shot by half a meter, fired. The man dropped mid-stride, his squad freezing instantly. They hit the ground, afraid to move. The ambush halted cold. 3 minutes 44 seconds, 6 positions gone. Halfway, but she was burning out. Her shoulder throbbed from the recoil. Her breathing was sharp, shallow. The adrenaline that kept her alive now felt like poison in her veins. She ignored it. Pain was background noise. Target 6. Range 445 meters. Sniper on the opposite ridgeline. Through her scope she saw it, the faint reflection of a scope glinting in the sun. Another sniper, another professional doing exactly what she was doing. For a brief second she felt something almost like respect. Then she exhaled. She adjusted for drop, wind drift, angle, squeezed. The shot echoed across the valley, deeper, heavier than before. Through the scope she saw a flicker, a distant figure jerking backward, rifle clattering away down the rocks. 4 minutes 38 seconds, 7 down. The enemy's fire began to die. What was once a storm was now scattered raindrops. The SEALs were regrouping, patching wounds, preparing to move. But Leia wasn't done, not yet. She kept moving, her body low, crawling through mud and roots, repositioning every 30 seconds. The jungle became her camouflage, her rhythm. Target 7. Range 312 meters. 3 fighters behind a boulder, coordinating new fire lanes. She fired once, center mass. The bullet passed through 2 men, killing both. The third ran. 5 minutes 21 seconds, 9 kills. Overwatch, the SEAL leader's voice again. We're preparing to move, need those remaining guns silenced. Working on it, her tone was clipped, focused, emotionless. Target 8. Range 267 meters. Heavy machine gun, close range. The barrel was shielded. She couldn't hit the gunner directly. Instead, she aimed at the ammo feeder. Fired. The man jerked dead before he hit the ground, but his body twisted the belt, jamming the weapon. The gunner turned instinctively to fix it. Leia's second round took him clean. 6 minutes 29 seconds, 11 positions down. Only one left. The jungle had gone eerily quiet. Only stray gunshots now panicked, disorganized. The SEALs were already moving. Target 9. Range 389 meters. 2 officers with radios. Command element. Her breathing slowed, muscles tight, every nerve alive. She sighted the first, fired. Shifted to the second before the echo faded, fired again. 7 minutes 51 seconds, 12 kills. 9 seconds to spare. The valley fell silent. The gunfire that had been a storm now faded to a memory. The jungle exhaled. The SEALs moved, disciplined, silent, alive. Her radio crackled once more. Overwatch, we're mobile. You just saved 8 lives. Thank you doesn't begin to cover it. She didn't reply. Words didn't fit this kind of silence. For 5 seconds, she allowed herself to feel it, the pulse of relief, the tremor of victory. Then she was moving again, breaking down her gear, cleaning her tracks. Every sniper knew the rule. The most dangerous moment is right after you succeed. Because that's when they come looking for the ghost who killed them. Leia moved through the jungle like mist, controlled, invisible. Behind her, rotors thundered, quick reaction force inbound. The men she'd saved were going home. She was going deeper into the shadows. By the time the helicopters reached the valley, she was gone. The jungle was behind her now. But the sound never left. Even in silence, she could still hear it. The low, rhythmic hammer of her rifle. The shouts echoing through the valley. The ghosts of men who almost didn't make it home. Lieutenant Leia Cole sat in the back of the helicopter, helmet in her lap, the cabin's red light washing everything in blood-tinted shadow. The vibration rattled through her boots, through the steel bench, through the part of her that still wasn't sure this was over. Across from her, a medic worked on one of the wounded SEALs, his leg wrapped, morphine drip steady. He caught her eye once, just long enough to mouth the words "thank you." She nodded but looked away. Gratitude was harder to face than gunfire. The pilot's voice cut through the headset. "Basin 5, hold tight." She stared out the open door. Night wind clawed at her hair. Below, the jungle looked almost peaceful from this height, dark green waves under a black ocean sky. From up here, no one could see the blood soaked into the roots. 8 lives saved. 12 targets down. 0 recognition waiting. She adjusted the rifle beside her, the Barrett's barrel still warm despite the hour-long flight. It felt heavier now, not just from the steel and optics, but from what it represented. One weapon had changed the outcome of a battle, but also changed her. When they landed, floodlights turned night into harsh daylight. The air smelled of fuel and rain. Ground crew moved with practiced rhythm, medics rushing the wounded inside, techs unloading gear. Leia climbed down last. Her legs trembled, not from exhaustion, but from the slow collapse that always came after adrenaline left the body. She slung the rifle across her back and followed the others into the debrief area, a nondescript concrete room that smelled like coffee, cordite, and wet jungle gear. No one spoke to her at first. They didn't have to. The look said enough, half awe, half disbelief. The myth was already starting to form. 12 kills, 8 minutes, 1 sniper. Inside, the SEAL team leader sat on a folding chair, arm bandaged, fatigue etched into every line of his face. When she entered, he stood. No salute, no formalities, just an understanding. "You saved my team," he said quietly. "You saved my brother." Leia wanted to say, "You did your job." But the words wouldn't come. She only nodded once. He handed her a battered unit patch. "Keep it for luck." She closed her hand around it. The fabric was rough, frayed at the edges real. Not ceremony, not politics, just a piece of cloth soaked in gratitude. Later in the dim barracks, she sat alone cleaning her rifle. Each pull of the cloth down the barrel steadied her heartbeat. The storm outside mirrored the storm inside, loud, chaotic, unresolved. She thought of the 12 faces she never saw. She thought of the 8 men who would see their children again. And then, inevitably, she thought of the rules she'd broken. In the soft reflection of her rifle's metal, she saw herself, not the soldier everyone would talk about tomorrow, but the woman who'd made a choice she couldn't take back. Disobeying orders saved lives. But in the military, defiance always came with a cost. When the summons arrived the next morning, it wasn't unexpected. A sealed envelope, black letters. Report to command, 900 hours. The room was colder than the jungle had ever been. 3 officers sat behind a table. No nameplates, no insignia beyond what was necessary. A colonel from Special Operations Command. A SEAL commander she vaguely recognized. And her own stone-faced. A single monitor on the wall played silent footage, drone captures, ballistic overlays, radio waveforms scrolling in pale blue light. Every detail of the firefight laid bare. The colonel didn't look up from the tablet. "Captain Cole, we've reviewed the entire engagement." His tone was neutral, too neutral. "Before we proceed, walk me through your decision-making process." Leia kept her posture straight, eyes forward. "Sir, Ground Team Alpha was pinned. Multiple casualties surrounded. Air support 30 minutes out. I assessed survival time at 10 minutes or less. Observation would have resulted in total loss of team. I had position, capability, and clear line of sight to enemy command elements." The colonel looked up, finally meeting her gaze. "But standard doctrine dictates you wait." "Yes, sir." "And yet you didn't." "No, sir." Silence, only the faint hum of the projector. The SEAL commander leaned forward, elbows on the table. "You engaged 50+ enemy combatants solo." "Correction," she said quietly. "I engaged 12 key positions coordinating their fire. Remove coordination, remove control, the rest fall apart." For a moment even the colonel's mask slipped. Respect flickered there, then duty replaced it. He exhaled, flipping a folder open. "Captain Cole, I have 2 documents in this file. The first recommends you for the Silver Star. The second is a formal letter of reprimand for disobeying direct orders." She felt the air thicken around her. Not anger, not fear, just acceptance. "Both will go in your record," he continued. "Both are justified." Her remained silent. The SEAL commander was. "Sir, with respect, my men are alive because she broke those orders. If that's insubordination, we need more of it." The colonel gave him a look that said the argument was old, unwinnable. "Captain, from a command perspective, you created a serious problem. You acted without authorization, exposed yourself to unacceptable risk, and nearly compromised an operation we're not supposed to be running in the first place." Leia's reply was calm, "Yes, sir." He studied her, then closed the file. "Fortunately, or unfortunately, depending how you view it, your record attracted attention." He slid another envelope across the table. "Third document, recruitment request." Leia frowned. "Recruitment for what, sir?" Her spoke for the first time. "A classified unit, highly autonomous, precision infiltration and strategic interdiction, single operator missions." The colonel's tone softened, almost curious. "They've been watching you for a year, your decisions under pressure, your disregard for rigidity when it saves lives. They think you fit." She looked down at the envelope, untouched. "Solo infiltration," she repeated. "No support, no backup." The SEAL commander nodded. "No glory either, the kind of work that doesn't exist on paper." And if I die on one of these missions? The colonel didn't hesitate. Then you never existed, Captain. The room fell silent again. Only the hum of the projector filled it, looping back to the same frame, a still image of her rifle muzzle flashing in the rain. She understood. This was the price of what she'd done. Not punishment. A doorway. The colonel closed the folder. You have 72 hours to decide. After that, the offer's gone. Leia stood, saluted. Understood, sir. When she reached the door, the SEAL commander spoke quietly behind her. Whatever you choose, know this, my team owes you everything. That's not a debt that expires. She paused, then turned just enough to meet his eyes. I didn't do it for debts. No, he said softly. You did it because someone had to, don't lose that. Outside, sunlight cut through the storm clouds, gold and hard and indifferent. She walked across the compound alone. The world kept moving, trucks rumbling, rotors spinning, soldiers laughing somewhere too far away. But her world had narrowed to a choice. The silver star or the reprimand didn't matter. Neither changed what she'd seen in that valley, the moment when hesitation meant death and action meant disobedience. That choice had rewritten who she was. For the next 2 days, she barely slept. She ran until her lungs burned, then sat awake at night, staring at the ceiling, hearing again those 3 words through static: "We're getting overrun." She remembered her instructor at Fort Bragg years ago, a grizzled man who once told her, every sniper fights 2 wars, one on the ground, one inside. The inside war never ended. By the second night, she knew her answer. Not because she wanted glory, there wouldn't be any. Not because she wanted danger, she had enough of that. Because in that valley, she'd learned something the manuals never taught. Sometimes one person can change the outcome, if they're willing to stand alone. 48 hours later, Leia Cole handed her a single page. No speech, no hesitation. I accept. He nodded once, not surprised. Then pack light, they don't give second chances. She turned to leave, but he called after her. Leia. She stopped. Not every battle is won with a rifle. Remember that. She didn't answer. Some lessons you could only learn in silence. That night she packed her gear. Minimal, rifle, sidearm, photos she never looked at but couldn't throw away. The patch the SEAL leader gave her. Before dawn, a black transport plane lifted off from an unmarked runway, climbing toward a horizon no map recorded. She didn't know where it was taking her, only that she wouldn't be coming back the same. As the engines droned and the world below shrank to mist, she closed her eyes. The jungle was gone, the noise was gone. But in her chest, a single thought stayed alive, steady as a heartbeat. Sometimes, doing the right thing means breaking the rules written by people who have never heard bullets whisper past their ears. The plane banked east, into rising sun. And Leia Cole disappeared into the kind of work that never made headlines. The kind of work that kept others alive without ever being known. They called it the program. No patch, no paperwork, no record. Just a name whispered in the kind of places where truth stopped existing. The transport plane landed before dawn on a strip of asphalt carved into a desert no map admitted existed. When the hatch opened, heat rolled in, dry, heavy, absolute. It smelled of dust, jet fuel, and distance. A man in civilian clothes waited on the tarmac, sunglasses reflecting the engine's fading glow. Captain Cole. Yes, sir. Not sir, he said. Nobody here has rank. He turned and started walking. She followed. That was her first lesson. Out here there were no titles, no names, only results. The facility looked ordinary, low concrete buildings, antennas pointing at a sky that never spoke back. But beneath it was something else entirely. Tunnels, ranges, simulation chambers, endless corridors of silence. She spent her first 3 days signing nothing. No oath, no contract. The only document she touched was a single sheet that read, "You understand that you will cease to exist as a member of the United States Armed Forces." She signed. Training began immediately. There were no uniforms, no morning formations. The instructors wore plain shirts, no insignia, eyes like surgeons, clinical, unblinking. They didn't care about rank, gender, or service record. They cared about performance under isolation. Because isolation was the new battlefield. Days blurred into one another. Long-range shooting in extreme wind conditions. Solo infiltration through desert terrain. Navigation with no GPS, no maps, no support. Every exercise ended the same way, with silence. No praise, no critique, no feedback. You either passed or you vanished. At night, she'd lie awake in her bunk, staring at the ceiling fan and listening to the desert wind scrape against the walls. It sounded like whispers, fragments of memory, pieces of the person she used to be. Leia Cole, the soldier who had brothers in arms, laughter in the chow hall, noise in her world. That person was gone now. Here she was Leia, she wasn't captain. She was just Operator 47. A number on a roster that didn't exist. One evening she was called to the underground range. The instructor waiting there was older, gray hair, expressionless, voice like sandpaper. "Take the rifle," he said. She lifted it from the bench, custom built, lightweight, perfectly balanced. Winds shifting, 21 degrees southwest, variable gusts. Hit target Charlie at 1200. She sighted in, adjusted, exhaled, squeezed. The round hit center. The man didn't blink. "You've done this before." "Yes, sir." He tilted his head. "And yet you still say, sir. That'll get you killed out there. Out there, nobody in charge but the bullet." He turned away, again. She fired, then again, each shot precise, each one a heartbeat in a rhythm she didn't realize she'd missed. After an hour, he stopped. "You know why you're here?" "Because I broke the rules," she said. He smiled faintly. "No, because you understood when to." Then he leaned close enough for her to hear the quiet truth beneath his words. "Our missions aren't about obedience. They're about judgment. You'll be alone, no command structure, no one to call. The decisions you make will rewrite maps or burn them." Leia met his gaze. "And if I make the wrong one?" He shrugged. "You won't know until it's too late." Weeks turned to months. They trained her to vanish, to erase her presence so completely that even memory forgot her. Counter-tracking, deep recon, disguise, silent communication, satellite evasion, cultural infiltration. She learned languages she'd never heard before, fired weapons she'd never seen before, and pushed her body beyond limits that used to mean stop. Sometimes, in the middle of it all, she'd think back to the jungle, the moment before her first shot. The way fear had become focus. The way choice had become instinct. That moment had defined her, but it had also cost her. One night she sat alone outside the barracks, rifle across her knees, watching the horizon bleed red as the sun fell. A man approached quietly, same plain clothes, same hard eyes. He was one of them, a ghost like her. "Beautiful, isn't it?" he said. She nodded. "Doesn't last long, though. That's the problem with beauty. It disappears before you realize you needed it." She glanced at him. "You've been here long. Long enough to forget what day it is." He studied her face for a moment. "You're the sniper from the jungle story, right? 12 kills, 8 minutes. "That's not a story," she said softly. "It will be," he replied. "Everything becomes one eventually." He started to leave, then stopped. "Here's some advice. They'll strip away who you were until nothing's left but the mission. Hold on to something small, anything, a piece of yourself that's still yours." After he walked away, Leia opened the small pouch she kept tucked inside her jacket. Inside the patch, the one the SEAL team leader had given her, frayed, torn, real. She traced its edges with her thumb. That was her piece, her reminder of why. The first live exercise came without warning. They woke her at 200. No explanation, just an order: gear up. Within 30 minutes, she was on a chopper flying low over black water, no lights, no markings. The voice in her headset said, "You'll be dropped 10 miles offshore. Swim in, reach the compound, mark the HVT's location, and exfiltrate unseen. No kills, no detection. Failure equals termination." She didn't ask what kind of termination. She already knew. The ocean was cold, sharp as needles. Every stroke burned. But she moved like she always did, measured, silent, efficient. Hours later, she reached land, crawled up the sand, soaked, breathing through clenched teeth. The compound was ahead, floodlights sweeping over steel and concrete. Guards, drones, motion sensors. Her movements were poetry, calculated, deliberate. She slipped through shadows, avoided cameras, counted her steps by heartbeats. When she reached the target building, she saw him, through the glass of a second-floor window. A man in a suit, talking to someone unseen. She snapped 2 photos, sent the encrypted ping to command. "Target marked," she whispered. "Copy," came the reply. "Exfiltrate." But as she turned to leave, a guard stepped into view, too close. He froze. She froze. For half a second, neither moved. Then she acted. Knife silent, clean. One motion, his body dropped into shadow. Her heartbeat thundered, but her hand stayed steady. By the time the extraction team arrived hours later, she was gone, back in the water, swimming toward nothing. When she climbed into the recovery boat, the same instructor waited, face unreadable. "You were told no kills." She met his gaze. "I made a choice." He studied her for a long moment, then nodded once. "And you made the right one." He turned away. "You're ready." Weeks later, she stood in a dark briefing room. Only one screen glowed on the wall. The mission was simple: eliminate a high-value target in an unmarked region. Solo, no support, no acknowledgement. The officer behind the desk didn't ask if she understood. He just handed her a sealed case. Inside, her Barrett, cleaned, modified, scope rebalanced for wind drift. Her hands closed around it like an old memory, finding its shape again. "Welcome to the other war," he said. She left without another word. Her next 72 hours were silence and preparation. She studied satellite photos, weather data, elevation maps. She memorized every ridge, every line of sight, every variable she couldn't control. When she closed her eyes, she saw the jungle again, the chaos, the 12 flashes of light. But this time, she wasn't saving anyone. This time, she was the weapon. The night before insertion, she sat alone by the airstrip. The world around her was a sheet of black velvet, the stars cold and sharp. For the first time in months, she allowed herself to think about home. Her father teaching her to shoot with a .22 back in Montana. Her mother's quiet pride when she got her commission. All the small, simple things that now belonged to another lifetime. She wondered if they still thought of her. If they'd ever know who she became. She doubted it. Somewhere behind her, an engine started. A figure approached, a man carrying a clipboard and a faint smirk. "You don't sleep much," he said. "Never did." He held out a small envelope. "Last message you'll receive before deployment, from command." She opened it, just a single line of text. "One shot, one kill, no excuses." The same words engraved on the patch inside her pocket. She smiled slightly. It wasn't encouragement, it was expectation. And she would meet it. By dawn, she was airborne. The desert faded below her. Clouds rolled past like ghosts. No coordinates, no confirmation, just trust. That was the final stage of the transformation. learning to believe in nothing but your own judgment. She wasn't Captain Cole anymore. She wasn't a name in any database, or a story told over whiskey in barracks. She was a ghost now, an operator without a past, a woman shaped by choices no one would ever know she made. And as the plane vanished into the clouds, her mind was calm. Because for the first time since that jungle valley, she understood the truth about people like her. They weren't defined by the orders they followed. They were defined by the moments when there were no orders left. They told her the mission was simple. They always said that. High-value target, third vehicle in the convoy, one shot. But nothing was simple when you were the only one on the ground. The helicopter dropped her 10 kilometers from the kill zone in the middle of nowhere, a spine of mountains sharp enough to tear the sky open. The wind howled through the ravines, dry and merciless. She hit the ground, rolled, and stayed there listening, always listening first. Silence, just wind. She rose slowly, adjusting the weight of her pack. Every step would matter now. The extraction bird wouldn't return for 72 hours. If she missed the window, she wasn't getting out. She began to climb. The mountains of Central Asia weren't like the jungles she came from. They didn't hide you, they judged you. Every movement echoed, every mistake amplified. She moved like smoke between rocks, her rifle wrapped in camouflage cloth to break the glint. The cold bit through her gloves, through her skin, through her thoughts. Altitude sickness hit her halfway up. Thin air, shallow breath, pounding heart. She pushed through it like she always did, controlled breathing, slow packing. She learned long ago that fear and exhaustion spoke the same language. You just had to choose which voice to listen to. It took 3 days to reach the ridge. 3 days of crawling through shale, hiding under tarps when drones passed overhead, drinking melted snow through a tube filter. Her hands were raw, nails cracked, muscles stiff as wire. But she was here. She unpacked the Barrett M82, laid it across a rock ledge, and began building her nest. Every motion deliberate, every noise calculated. She checked wind direction with a strip of gauze, adjusted for density, altitude, temperature, humidity, and the steep downhill angle. She'd been in position for almost 18 hours when she finally heard it. The faint, rhythmic hum of engines far below. Convoy. 12 vehicles, 2 gun trucks in the lead, 2 at the rear, 8 in between. The third vehicle carried her target. The file she'd been given contained almost nothing. A grainy photo, a code name, and a single sentence. This man's existence destabilizes everything. She never asked how. That wasn't her job anymore. But she couldn't help wondering. Who decides that one life is worth ending to save 1,000 others? And who decides they're right? She blinked the thought away, pressed her cheek against the stock. The convoy was entering the pass now, a narrow, serpentine road carved between sheer cliffs, perfect for an ambush. Or a ghost. The wind was unpredictable here, curling through the canyon in invisible swirls. She waited, studied it, learned its rhythm like a heartbeat. Range, 847 meters. Downhill angle, 27 degrees. Estimated speed, 40 kilometers per hour. Target exposure time, 2 seconds. She made harder shots in training. But training never bled. Her radio was silent, no chatter, no command voice feeding her updates. That was the hardest part of these missions, the silence. It left room for thoughts. For memories. She thought of the jungle, the 12 flashes, the 8 men who survived. She thought of the reprimand, the offer, the choice. Then she thought of something else. The SEAL commander's words before she left. Don't lose that. What he meant was, don't lose yourself. But out here, losing yourself wasn't failure. It was survival. Through her scope, she saw the target's vehicle. A black SUV, armored, tinted windows, license plates covered in mud. A small flag fluttered on the hood. Not an enemy, not an ally either. One of those in-between nations, where war hid behind politics. Her mission brief hadn't said what this man had done, only what would happen if he didn't die. Sometimes that was mercy. Sometimes it was madness. Leia adjusted the scope again. Her breathing slowed. Her pulse matched the rhythm of the wind. For a moment, everything was still. And she remembered what her instructor told her the day she joined the program. Out there, nobody in charge but the bullet. She half smiled. It sounded colder now than it had then. The SUV entered the curve. 2 seconds of exposure, that's all she would get. She inhaled. Held. Through the scope, the tinted window flashed open for a fraction of a moment, sunlight glinting off glass. Her crosshairs steadied. She found the space between heartbeats. Squeezed. The Barrett roared, echoing through the mountains like thunder trapped in stone. Through her scope she tracked the round's vapor trail. Time slowed. Impact. The SUV jolted sideways, tires screaming. The lead vehicle swerved to block rear gun trucks fanned out. Soldiers spilled out, shouting, scanning. The convoy's perfect formation fractured instantly. The target was gone. One breath, one decision. Her radio stayed silent. No confirmation needed. Mission complete. Leia broke down the rifle in seconds, hands moving by instinct. Barrel unscrewed, scope detached, parts tucked into her pack in perfect order. She slung the gear, scanned the ridgeline once more. Already the convoy below was in chaos. Men running, vehicles repositioning, radios screaming into static. She was invisible. The shot came from nowhere. That was the point. She started the exfiltration, boots crunching over gravel, the wind erasing her trail before she'd taken 10 steps. No footprints, no trace, no proof. By the time the sun dipped below the horizon, she was already miles away. The descent was brutal. Her knees burned with every drop. Once she slipped on loose stone and slammed into the ground, the shock rattling her teeth. She stayed there a long moment, face pressed against the earth, breathing through pain. Then she pushed herself up again. There was no one to call for help, no one waiting with medevac. That was the trade-off of being a ghost. You didn't die on the battlefield. You disappeared from it. It took her 3 days to reach the extraction point. 3 days of cold, hunger, exhaustion. 3 days of replaying the shot in her head, the echo of it, the stillness that followed. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the SUV jerk sideways. And she wondered if, somewhere inside, a man had realized, too late, what was happening. The thought didn't haunt her, it simply existed, a fact, not a feeling. That was what the program had trained her to be, efficient, unshakable, silent. But silence had weight. And the longer you carried it, the heavier it became. When the helicopter finally appeared over the ridge, she was ready. She didn't wave, didn't signal. She just stood there, hood pulled up, wind tearing at her face. The bird hovered low. A crew chief reached down. "Welcome back," he said. She nodded, climbed aboard, and sat near the window as the desert rolled away beneath them. The sun was setting again, burning the horizon blood orange. It was beautiful. And like everything beautiful, it disappeared before you realized how much you needed it. Back at base, they didn't ask how it went. They already knew. 1 target down. Mission success. Strategic situation stabilized. No medals, no paperwork, no mention in any report. The debrief was a single sentence. Next assignment pending. Leia returned to her quarters, stripped off her gear, and sat in the half-dark, listening to the hum of the ventilation. Her hands trembled slightly, not from fear, from release. The mission was over. The silence was. She pulled the small fabric patch from her pocket, the same one from that jungle, edges now frayed from years of wear. She placed it on the table beside her rifle. 12 targets, 8 minutes. One shot. The words still defined her, but they meant something different now. Back then she'd been saving lives. Now she was taking them. She wasn't sure which was harder to live with. Later, as she lay awake, her mind drifted again to the colonel's words the day she joined the program. You'll be operating alone, unsupported. The recognition will be non-existent, but what you do will change the world quietly. He'd been right about the quiet part. The world didn't even know she existed. And yet, the world had shifted because of her. Just a little. Just enough. That thought should have felt like comfort. It didn't. Because the truth was, the more difference you made, the less of yourself was left afterward. She understood that now. Every mission took something, a sliver of conscience, a shade of humanity. The question wasn't if it would break her. Only when. 3 weeks later, her next assignment came. No details, no justification, just coordinates. Different country, different name, same silence. As she read the file, she noticed her own reflection faintly in the laptop screen. Harder, colder, still young but older somehow. She barely recognized the woman staring back. Leah Cole, the soldier who once believed one person could make a difference, was fading into someone else entirely. Someone who did make a difference, but never in the way she'd imagined. She closed the laptop, sat back, and whispered to the empty room. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts. The words hung in the air, fragile, half forgotten. Then she stood, packed her rifle, and walked out into the desert night. Another mission waited. Another silence to keep. Another impossible shot only she could take. Because that's what ghosts do. They disappear. And in disappearing, they change everything. They said the hardest part of the program wasn't the missions. It was the waiting between them. Out there on the ridgelands and rooftops, she knew exactly who she was. Here, inside the walls of the facility, she was no one. Weeks drifted by in a blur of silence. No music, no laughter, no chatter in the mess hall, just the hum of generators and the click of boots in concrete hallways. Each operator moved like a ghost among ghosts, eyes forward, words rationed. Sometimes when she passed others in the corridor, they nodded. Sometimes they didn't. It didn't matter. Names had no weight here. She completed 4 missions since the mountain convoy. Each one successful. Each one the same pattern: arrive unseen, act precisely, vanish completely. After the 4th, command had called her into a debriefing room the size of a closet. No colonel this time, no ceremony. Just a single analyst with unreadable eyes. Results were satisfactory, he said. Collateral minimal. He paused. You will rest for 12 days. Rest. That was their word for solitude. She spent the first 2 days cleaning her rifle. Not because it needed it, but because the ritual still calmed her. By day 3, her hands began to tremble from stillness. By day 4, her mind started inventing sound, echoes of gunfire that weren't there, voices that belonged to no one. She went running. Miles through the desert heat, sweat burning her eyes, lungs scraping against the dry air. She ran until her legs buckled, then lay on the sand staring at a sky too big to comprehend. Out here the stars looked closer, like they were leaning down to listen. What do you want from me? She whispered once to no one. The wind didn't answer. On the 5th day, she went to the range. Long-distance course, 1,200 meters, crosswinds dancing. She set up, adjusted, fired. Perfect shot. Then another. And another. Each round struck dead center, small explosions of dust and silence. After an hour, a voice behind her said, "You're wasting ammunition." She turned. The man was the same older instructor, gray hair, desert-burned skin. He leaned against the wall, arms crossed. "Old habits," she replied. "Or old ghosts." He walked closer, eyes on the target downrange. "They told me you haven't spoken to anyone in a week." I didn't have anything to say. He nodded slowly. "That's how it starts." She frowned. "How what starts?" "The quiet. At first it feels peaceful, then it starts eating through you like acid." He sat on the bench beside her rifle. "You know the trick to staying human in this line of work." She said nothing. He tapped his chest once. "You find something to love, doesn't matter what, a song, a memory, a person, something small enough to keep hidden but strong enough to keep you tethered." Leia looked down at her hands. "And if you can't find anything left to love?" He smiled sadly. "Then you start to disappear for real." That night, she dreamed of the jungle again. But it wasn't the battle. It was the moment after the quiet. The smell of gunpowder and rain, the way the light broke through the canopy like forgiveness. When she woke, her face was wet. She hadn't realized she could still cry. Mission orders came the next morning. No rest, no reason, just coordinates and a date. The target this time wasn't an enemy combatant. It was a broker, a man who armed both sides of a civil war for profit. Intelligence claimed he'd killed thousands indirectly. Leia read the file twice. There were photos, family, parties, expensive cars. He didn't look like a monster. He looked like someone you'd sit next to on a plane. That was the thing about monsters. They rarely knew they were monsters. She closed the folder and whispered, "Neither do we." The insertion was clean. A dense urban skyline, midnight drizzle, neon lights bleeding into puddles. She moved through the city like a shadow, disguised as a tourist with a camera case that weighed 30 pounds more than it should. The shot would be from a hotel balcony 600 meters away. She checked the window opposite hers, the target's suite, curtains open, music playing faintly. He was laughing with two guests, wine in hand. For the first time since joining the program, she hesitated. Because laughter was human. And killing someone, human, felt different than killing a silhouette on a thermal scope. She adjusted the scope again, crosshairs hovering over his chest. He arms the men who slaughtered children, she reminded herself. Her finger brushed the trigger. But her mind whispered another question. "And who armed you?" Her breathing faltered. She pulled the scope away. Down below, thunder rolled through the streets. She could call it off. The program didn't need reasons, they just needed results. But she'd never done that before. Her hand trembled. Then she saw it. The man turned, lifting his glass toward a framed photo on the table. A woman and child, his wife, his daughter. The same hand that toasted Prophet also once held a child. Leia exhaled, pressed her cheek to the stock again, and whispered, "I'm sorry." The barrel cracked softly against the city noise. Glass shattered. The laughter stopped. She packed up, walked away, disappeared into the rain. Back at base, the analyst's tone didn't change. Target neutralized, mission effective. He didn't notice the hesitation in her voice when she replied, "Confirmed." That night she sat in her bunk staring at the patch again. 12 targets, 8 minutes. Back then she'd been saving people. Now she was saving policy. And she couldn't tell if that was still a difference. Days later, she saw the instructor again outside the range. He studied her face, saw the exhaustion hiding behind discipline. "Rough one?" he asked. She nodded. He handed her a small envelope, from command. Inside, a photograph. Not of a target. Of a school, children laughing in a courtyard somewhere in that same city. A note scribbled beneath. Because of you, they're still alive. She stared at it for a long time. It wasn't absolution, but it was something. Over the next months, missions blurred together. Deserts, cities, mountains, faces. Each one justified, each one necessary. And with each success, she felt herself slipping further away from the woman who once needed reasons. Her efficiency became legend inside the program, a whisper passed between handlers. Cole doesn't miss. She didn't feel pride, only distance. Until one day the silence cracked. It happened during a transport between assignments. A younger operator sat across from her, barely 25, eyes too bright for this place. He kept glancing her way, finally blurting out, "You're Leia Cole, right? The one from the jungle." She didn't answer. He smiled nervously. "I heard you saved a SEAL team single-handed. That's crazy." She looked out the window. "That's not a story you should keep repeating." "Why not? It's legendary." "Because legends are just ghosts wearing medals they never got." He didn't understand, but he nodded anyway. When they landed, he shook her hand. "Maybe I'll make my own legend one day." She almost told him not to try. But the words died in her throat. That night in her quarters, she opened her old journal, a habit she'd buried years ago. She wrote one line. "The farther I go, the less I recognize the woman who started walking." Then she tore the page out, burned it in the sink, and watched the ashes curl like dying moths. Weeks later, another mission. Another name. Another life measured in seconds. But when she looked through the scope this time, she felt something new, not hesitation but fatigue. Not physical, moral. She still took the shot. Still packed her gear. Still disappeared. But afterward, when the desert wind passed over her like a whisper, it sounded almost like the word why. Back at base, she found a letter slipped under her door. No signature, no insignia. It contained only a single line, written in block letters. "You're not the only one asking that question." No explanation, no clue who sent it. But for the first time in years, she felt less alone. She folded the paper, tucked it inside the same pouch as the patch. Her last two anchors. Outside, the desert night shimmered with heat lightning, silent, distant, endless. Leia looked toward it and whispered to the wind. "I'm still here." The wind whispered back nothing. But that was answer enough. Because silence, she'd learned, didn't always mean absence. Sometimes it just meant someone was still listening. The first lie came quietly. Like most of them did. It was buried in a mission report, one small discrepancy in a sea of perfect numbers. The file said the operation neutralized 3 targets. But Leia remembered 4. She didn't think much of it at first. Reports got redacted all the time, details vanished, paperwork rewrote reality. But then it happened again. And again. Different missions, same pattern, numbers that didn't match, coordinates slightly off, outcomes simplified into clean phrases, objective secured, threat neutralized, civilian impact minimal. Minimal. That word stuck like a splinter. One night she stayed behind after debrief. The analyst had stepped out, leaving his tablet on the table. She didn't plan to look, but something inside her, the same instinct that once told her to pull a trigger when everyone else said hold, made her reach for it. The screen was unlocked. The report open. And there it was. A satellite feed she'd never been shown. Her last mission, a strike in a coastal town. The official briefing had said the target was a bomb maker. She'd taken the shot clean, silent. But the footage on the tablet told a different story. The explosion that followed wasn't contained. The building collapsed, killing 6 others, not soldiers, families. Her chest went cold. She scrolled further. The minimal civilian impact was marked as unverified. The column beside it had been manually altered, the analyst's initials. He'd changed it. He'd rewritten it. The truth wasn't convenient. That night she couldn't sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw that building, crumbling, dust swallowing light, the ripple of destruction spreading from one clean, clinical shot. She sat up in bed, hands shaking. For years she'd lived by precision, every shot calculated, every outcome measured. But this wasn't precision. This was control. Someone had taken her accuracy and used it to paint over lies. She wasn't a weapon anymore. She was a signature that made murder look surgical. The next morning she went to the range, but not to shoot. She just stood there, staring down the line at the distant targets. The instructor appeared behind her, as he always did, quiet, observant. "You missed training," he said. "I wasn't in the mood. Bad dreams. Worse, bad math." He studied her expression. "Talk to me." She turned to face him. "You ever wonder if what we do actually makes the world safer?" His eyes softened just a little. "Every day." And he sighed. "I stopped asking the question. The answer changes depending on who you ask." "I saw footage," she said quietly. "Civilians, collateral." He didn't look surprised. "How long have you known?" she asked. He looked away, long enough to stop pretending it was accidental. The silence between them was heavier than any explosion. "So we're just supposed to live with that?" she asked. "We live with it," he said, "or we leave. But you already know what happens to people who leave." She did. She'd seen the files disappear. The faces, too. Ghosts didn't retire. They just stopped existing. That night she sat alone in her quarters, the patch and the folded note lying side by side on the table. She built her life on the belief that one person could make a difference. But what if the difference she'd made was built on lies? She remembered the colonel's words from that first debrief, years ago. "You created a significant problem, Captain Cole." Maybe he'd been right. Maybe the problem wasn't her disobedience. Maybe it was her conscience. The next mission came faster than expected. A city she'd never heard of. A target labeled "Threat to Global Stability." Standard briefing, standard prep. But this time she noticed something. The coordinates pointed not to a war zone, but to a government compound. She asked no questions. She was trained not to. But she remembered the civilians, the building, the lies. And for the first time in her career, she hesitated to chamber the first round. The setup was routine. Rooftop vantage point overlooking a narrow street. The target's car would arrive within minutes. She assembled the Barrett, checked her rangefinder, adjusted for humidity. Her breathing was steady, her hands were not. She told herself this was another mission, another necessary action. But the words felt hollow now, like orders whispered through static. She looked through the scope. Down below, security personnel moved into position. A small motorcade approached, 3 cars. The middle one was hers. And then she saw it. Through the tinted window, a woman, not a soldier, a diplomat. Her photo had been in the file, but the label beneath had read "Insurgent Facilitator." Except the woman through her scope was surrounded by aides, one carrying folders marked "Peace Talks." The entire scene felt wrong. Too exposed, too political, too clean. She felt her heartbeat spike. She switched to radio. "Command, confirm visual. Target appears non-combatant." Static, then a voice. "Proceed." "Repeat, confirm identification." "Proceed." Her finger hovered over the trigger. "Negative," she said. "Target unverified. I need confirmation." "Cole," the voice said sharply. "This comes from high authority. Execute now." Her stomach twisted. She looked again through the scope. The woman was stepping from the car, smiling, shaking hands. This wasn't war. This was politics wearing camouflage. Cole, execute. She closed her eyes, then switched off the radio. For the first time since joining the program, she walked away from the rifle. Her legs felt heavy, her breath uneven, her pulse thunderous in her ears. She packed the weapon slowly, methodically, as if each movement was a confession. When she reached the stairwell, she paused. Her reflection stared back from a broken mirror, pale, tense, older. For years, she'd thought control meant obedience. Now she understood it meant choice. And she'd just made hers. By the time she reached her safe house, the alarms were already active. Someone knew. Of course they did. There was no such thing as invisible betrayal. Her encrypted phone buzzed once. A message. You're compromised, get out. No signature. But she recognized the phrasing, the instructor. She didn't wait, she moved. Grabbed her go-bag, burned everything else, files, SIM cards, maps. The room filled with black smoke. Outside, she could already hear the sound of rotor blades in the distance. Fast, close. They were coming for her. She ran through the alleyways, weaving between shadows, slipping through markets and tunnels. Years of training turned survival into reflex. She'd been the hunter for so long, she almost forgot what it felt like to be hunted. When she reached the edge of the city, she ducked into an abandoned warehouse, chest heaving, clothes soaked in sweat. Her comms were gone, her tracker likely compromised. All she had left was her rifle and the patch, the last remnants of who she used to be. She sat in the darkness trying to think. But all she could hear was the voice from command. Proceed. That single word replayed over and over, a mantra of obedience twisted into something monstrous. Hours passed. Footsteps echoed outside. 2, maybe 3 men. She stayed silent, finger on the trigger, waiting for the angle. When the first silhouette appeared in the doorway, she fired. One shot, precise. The others froze. They didn't call her name. They didn't try to negotiate. They fired back, heavy, disciplined bursts. They were professionals. Her own. The program had sent its ghosts to erase their mistake. She relocated, crawling between crates, heart pounding. This wasn't combat, this was the cleanup. For a moment, she felt the familiar calm settle over her, that razor-edge focus that had once defined her. And then in the silence between bursts, a thought cut through like static. This is what happens to people who start asking questions. By dawn, she was gone again, over the border, moving through terrain she'd once memorized for other people's missions. Now she was her own mission. She didn't know who she was running from anymore, the program, command, or the version of herself that once believed obedience was purpose. But she knew one thing, she couldn't go back. Not after what she'd seen. As the sun rose behind her, painting the horizon in fire, she whispered the words she'd once said before every shot. Ground Team Alpha, keep your heads down, I'm going to work. Only this time, the enemy wasn't in the jungle. It was in the silence of her own conscience. And this time, she wasn't working for anyone. She was working against the lie that built her. Snow hit her better than shadows ever could. For 3 days, she'd moved north through the mountain passes, sleeping beneath rock ledges, melting ice for water, rationing energy bar crumbs she barely tasted. The cold was the kind that numbed thought before it froze flesh, clean, silent, merciless. The program was hunting her now. She could tell by the way the skis changed. Every morning, the hum of distant aircraft drifted overhead. Unmanned, patient, watching. She traveled by night, following goat trails only locals used, trusting instinct more than maps. Each valley looked the same, white, endless, unknowable. And still she kept moving. Because if she stopped, the ghosts would find her. On the 4th night, she reached an abandoned outpost, a forgotten relic from another country's forgotten war. Half buried in snow, walls cracked, windows shattered. Inside, she found rusted ammunition crates, and the scent of oil so old it had turned to dust. She built a small fire, careful to shield the flame. The light painted the walls in trembling orange. For the first time in days, she took off her gloves. Her fingers were raw, skin split along the knuckles. She unwrapped the small pouch from her jacket, the patch and the folded note still inside. Her last two truths. She placed them near the fire and stared. 12 targets, 8 minutes. 1 shot, 1 kill, no excuses. Words that had once defined her. Now they felt like epitaphs. Sleep came in fragments, 5 minutes here, 10 there, broken by dreams that felt more like memories. She was back in the jungle again, but this time, the muzzle flashes weren't enemy fire. They were mirrors. Every shot reflected her own face. She woke with a start, sweat freezing instantly on her skin. Outside, the wind howled through the cracks, carrying a sound that didn't belong. Rotors faint, distant. They'd found her. She killed the fire, packed fast, grabbed her rifle and slipped through the back. The world outside was moonbright, the snow a perfect betrayer. She moved downhill, fast and quiet, boots crunching softly, every sense sharpened to survival. Halfway down the slope, she heard the thump of rotor wash getting closer. Then voices on comms clipped familiar. Her language, her teams. They sent operators she knew. Cole, this is Command Unit 2. Stand down. You're surrounded. We can end this clean. The voice was calm, rehearsed, almost gentle. She recognized it. The instructor. Her heart slammed against her ribs. She ducked behind a ridge and pressed the radio's transmit key once, no words, just static, then tossed it into the snow. They'd triangulate the signal within seconds. That was fine. She was already moving again. By dawn, she'd reached the tree line, a dark forest sloping toward a frozen river. The cold was biting, wind slicing through every layer. She stopped long enough to check her bearings. Her hands were trembling now, both from exhaustion and something else, grief she didn't have time to name. She thought of the instructor's voice over the radio. Not angry, not vindictive. Just sad. That was the worst part, knowing he probably believed he was saving her by bringing her back. But there was no back anymore. At noon, she reached a small village, barely more than 10 houses clinging to the mountainside. Smoke rose from chimneys. Dogs barked somewhere. She hid the rifle under a tarp and walked in pretending to be a lost traveler. The villagers looked at her with the same suspicion they gave every stranger, but one old woman offered a bowl of soup. Leia ate slowly, savoring warmth she hadn't tasted in days. When the woman asked where she was headed, Leia simply said, "South." The woman nodded. Everything worth keeping goes south in the winter. She stayed there one night. No fire, no sleep. Just silence. In the early morning, she stepped outside and looked toward the mountains she'd crossed. Somewhere beyond them, men were planning her capture, maybe her death. And yet beneath all that fear, she felt something strange, clarity. For the first time in years, she wasn't following orders. Every step she took now was her own. Freedom, it turned out, felt a lot like exile. By the next evening, the hunt closed in again. She heard them before she saw them, a patrol sweeping the ridge above, voices distorted by the wind. She hid beneath a collapsed bridge, body pressed flat against the frozen earth. The snow muffled everything except her pulse. One of the voices drifted close. "You think she'll fight?" Another replied, "They always do." Boots crunched overhead. The bridge creaked. She waited until the sound faded. Then she moved again, slowly, deliberately, downstream, using the river as cover. She was good at disappearing. but they were good at finding what disappeared. Hours later, she found a cave. Small, hidden, perfect. Inside, she collapsed. Her body finally rebelled, muscles locking, breath ragged. The exhaustion she'd been holding back for days came crashing all at once. She pulled the patch from her pocket and stared at it under the dim beam of her flashlight. Her mind drifted back to the SEAL team, the leader's voice on the radio. "You just saved 8 lives." She closed her eyes. That had been the moment she believed she was doing something good. Now she wasn't sure what good even meant. At dawn, she heard movement outside. Soft, careful. Too careful for an animal. She raised the rifle, finger brushing the trigger guard. A silhouette appeared at the mouth of the cave. Hands up, unarmed. It was him, the instructor. For a long moment, neither moved. Then he said quietly, "You always were hard to find." She didn't lower the rifle. "You shouldn't have come." He stepped closer, slow. "I had to. They sent others, but I told them I'd handle it. You deserve that." "I deserve a bullet, you mean?" He shook his head. "No, I'm not here to bring you in. I'm here to tell you what you already know." "Which is?" He sighed, the program done. It was never meant to last. Too many lies, too much heat. They're burning everything, records, agents, assets. You were supposed to be erased along with it. Leia frowned. "And you?" "I made peace with my ghosts a long time ago." He looked at her rifle. "You planning to run forever?" "I don't know how to stop." He nodded slowly. "Then maybe stop running from, start running toward." She frowned. "Toward what?" He gave a faint smile. "Whatever's left of yourself." They sat in silence for a while, two ghosts sharing the same fading light. Finally he said, "You still have that patch?" She nodded. "Keep it," he said. "Reminds you who you were before all this." She studied him for a long moment. "You knew, didn't you, about the civilians?" His eyes lowered. "We all did, we just learned how to stop seeing it." "And me?" "You refuse to go blind. That's why they fear you." He stood, brushing snow from his coat. "You've got a 2-day window before the next team comes through. After that, the world gets smaller." He started to leave. "Why are you helping me?" she asked. He turned at the cave's mouth. "Because you reminded me what courage looks like when it stops wearing a uniform." Then he was gone. She stayed there until dusk, the wind howling like memory outside. For the first time in weeks, she let herself cry quietly, painfully, honestly. Not for the people she'd killed. Not for the ones who'd come after her. But for the version of herself that once believed following orders was the same as doing right. When the tears stopped, she wiped her face and whispered, "I'm still here." And in that moment, she felt something she hadn't in years. Not victory. Not relief. Just forgiveness, small, fragile, but real. That night, she walked out of the cave and looked up at the stars. They were cold, distant, indifferent. But for the first time, she didn't resent them. She pulled her hood up, shouldered her pack, and started down the mountain. Each step felt lighter, even as the snow deepened. The program might erase her. The world might forget her. But somewhere out there, in the lives she'd once saved, her ghost would still mean something. And maybe that was enough. The snow had begun to melt by the time she reached the valley. Spring always came late in the mountains, hesitant, almost unwilling, but it came all the same. She hadn't spoken to anyone in weeks. Didn't need to. The language of survival was silence. The last coordinates the instructor gave her led to a farmhouse half collapsed by time. A safe house once. Now just bones of wood and memory. Inside she found a radio, analog, old but functional. No trackers, no encryption. Just static, alive and endless. She tuned it slowly, catching bits of faraway frequencies. Laughter, weather reports, broken music from a country she didn't recognize. For a moment, she let the sound wash over her like rain. Then she turned it off. Peace wasn't in the noise. It was in the pause that followed. For 2 days, she stayed hidden. Rested, ate what little she had, cleaned her rifle out of habit, not necessity. And then, on the third morning, she saw them. 3 figures on the ridge above, distant, dark against the snowlight. Moving in formation. Her heartbeat didn't rise. She expected them. The program didn't forgive its own. And the program didn't leave loose ends. She watched through her scope, calm, detached, and recognized the way they moved. Deliberate, professional. Her replacements. She smiled faintly. So that's who I am now, she murmured, a training objective. She could run again. But something inside her had gone still. There was no more running left to do. She'd been a ghost long enough. It was time to stop haunting her own life. So she began to prepare, not for escape, but for choice. She gathered what she needed, set traps along the lower ridge, calculated every angle of approach. Old instincts returned, sharp and clean. But her intent had changed. She wasn't planning to kill them. She was planning to end something. When they came that evening, she was ready. The first 2 swept the perimeter, efficient, predictable. The third waited behind, covering the high ground. Leia moved silently between the rocks, the snow muffling her steps. She didn't fire. She didn't need to. Instead, she revealed herself. Deliberately. "Stand down," she called softly. The nearest operator froze, weapon raised. "Cole," a voice answered through the static, "you don't have to do this." She took a slow step forward, rifle lowered. "Neither do you." The silence that followed was heavier than any threat. Then the voice hardened. "Orders are orders." She almost laughed. "That's what they told me too." The muzzle of his rifle didn't waver. So she said the only thing she could think of. "Do you even know why they sent you?" No reply. "Because I stopped pretending," she whispered, "and they can't risk that spreading." Gunfire broke the air. Not hers, theirs. The first round struck the rock beside her. She dove, rolled, fired once, not to kill but to warn. Snow exploded in white plumes around them. The exchange was brief, chaotic, surgical, professionals fighting professionals who wished they were. When it ended, the valley was still again. 2 bodies lay in the snow. The third, the one who had spoken, was down but breathing. Leia approached slowly, weapon lowered. He couldn't have been more than 24. Young enough to still believe in orders. He looked up at her, eyes dazed. "Why?" She knelt beside him. "Because someone has to stop the machine before it builds another me." He blinked, confusion giving way to something like understanding. She handed him her rifle. "You'll need this more than I will." He shook his head weakly. "They'll come for you again." Leia smiled softly. "Maybe, but I won't be here when they do." By the next morning, she'd buried the 2 fallen. No dog tags, no names. Just small cairns of stone under the open sky. She placed her patch between them. 12 targets, 8 minutes. It didn't mean the same thing anymore. Now it meant, even precision has a conscience. That afternoon, she walked for miles until the valley opened into lowlands, green returning beneath the frost. In the distance, she saw the outline of a small settlement. Children were playing near a stream. A woman hung laundry on a line. It looked impossibly normal. She stopped on the ridge and just watched. The laughter carried through the wind like an echo of a world she'd almost forgotten existed. She remembered the photograph the analyst once gave her, the one from the city after the broker's death. The children laughing in the schoolyard. That had been the justification. Maybe it was still the truth. but she no longer needed to measure truth in bodies or orders. She just needed to know she hadn't become what she fought. As dusk fell, she found a small barn at the edge of the fields. She slept inside, among the smell of hay and dust, her rifle resting against the wall. Outside, rain began to fall softly. She lay there listening to it, eyes closed, and for the first time in years she didn't dream of war. She dreamed of light breaking through jungle leaves, of laughter on a radio, of a voice saying, "You just saved 8 lives." Days passed. No search teams came. No aircraft droned overhead. It was as if she'd finally vanished from the map, not erased but released. She spent her mornings walking through the hills, her afternoons helping the farmers fix fences, her evenings sitting alone by the river. She never told them her name. They never asked. Sometimes, the old woman she helped with chores would hum a song she didn't know. It was soft, wordless, full of the kind of peace that didn't need explanation. One night Leah asked, "What does it mean?" The woman smiled. "It's not a song, it's a prayer." Leah nodded. "For what?" "For those who carry too much silence inside them." That night, Leah sat by the river, the moon reflected in the current like a silver scar. She took the folded note from her pocket, the one that read, "Because of you, they're still alive." She held it over the water for a long moment, then let it go. The paper floated, turned, and drifted downstream until it disappeared. Her hands were steady when she whispered, "Then maybe that's enough." Months later, a report circulated through the remnants of the program. A small team sent north to recover classified material never returned. Satellite footage found no trace of them. Only melted snow. Only silence. The file was marked closed. But in the margins, someone had written 3 words in pen. Cole confirmed alive. Somewhere in the mountains, a lone figure watched the sunrise from a ridge. She no longer wore insignia or rank. Her rifle lay buried miles away. She carried no mission, no orders, just the quiet conviction that sometimes survival itself was the rebellion. The wind swept over her face, carrying the faint scent of pine and thawing earth. She smiled faintly. They could erase her records. They could rewrite her story. But they couldn't unmake what she'd chosen to remember. The sound of laughter over a radio. The weight of a choice that refused to obey. And the truth that even a single act of mercy could outlive every bullet. As the first light hit her face, she closed her eyes and whispered one last thought, not for anyone to hear, but because it needed to be said. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts. The wind carried her words away, scattering them across valleys that would never know her name. And for the first time, she didn't feel invisible. She felt free.